So should bad games be remade? That's the question we're going to try and answer today, so stick around and let's talk about it. Remakes are a sensitive subject in gaming. Some people say it's alright as long as it's done tastefully. Some people say no, you are diluting those memories. No matter which camp you fall into, I think we can all admit remakes are here to stay. They have proven to be financially beneficial to the studios, and that's really the bottom line. Money, money, money. But some remakes have been truly exceptional. They have been great remakes like Demon's Souls, Shadow of the Colossus. We also had the recent Dead Space remakes. And of course, we have all the Resident Evil remakes that have found a way to make a perfect game in Resident Evil 4 even better. Look, I really enjoyed the Resident Evil 4 remake. It was a flawless experience. We need to discuss if remakes should be eligible for Game of the Year nomination. I'm just saying we need to just talk about it. Resident Evil 4 was that good. It's a different topic for another day. I discussed the 5 rules of remakes. Basically, things studios need to do to keep the integrity of remakes. You could check it out. But over the course of time, studios have focused on critically acclaimed titles, basically games that are beloved by fans. But the well of great games seem to be drying up, and in the case for the Resident Evil IP, well, most of all the great games have been remade except Resident Evil 1. I have no idea why they skipped it. But Capcom recently released a survey asking fans about what to remake next. This is clearly a test to gauge fan reception for the least liked entries. So let's talk about if these bad games really deserve another shot. I really want to thank everyone for all the support for the Capcom video. We got a lot of new friends to the channel, and one of our new friends is Diego. He was so kind to provide the Steam key for Resident Evil 1 remake, so stick around to the end of the video on how you could win that. And if you're new here, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It greatly helps out the channel. There are already so many great remakes announced. Metal Gear Solid Delta, we still have the remake for the Old Republic in the pipeline, and of course the Prince of Persia remake that will probably never come out. But just like all the noteworthy recent remakes that have come out, all these games are great games in their franchise catalog. They are no-brainers for remakes. Final Fantasy VII is probably the highlight of the Final Fantasy brand, and it really just makes sense remaking all these games. But Capcom is at a crossroad on whether its black sheep should get the remake treatment. And I don't think they are super confident if fans will jump at the idea of these remakes. It is probably going to be the same problem EA is going to run to when they try to remake Dead Space 2, because after Dead Space 2 comes Dead Space 3, a game that fans have explicitly shunned. So I'm going to give my views on this issue, focusing on Dead Space 3, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, and why there is a pathway to remaking these games. I think we can all agree that every franchise that has spanned more than 3 titles always has that little black sheep, that particular entry that doesn't live up to the rest. It might not even necessarily be a bad game, it might just come down to franchise fatigue or some bad choices, but every franchise goes through this. But there is a clear mistake people make when reviewing games. People have begun mixing up a bad game from a boring game. This sounds like a very small distinction, but it is a very important one. There is a huge difference between a bad game and a boring game. A bad game can be fixed, a boring game cannot. There are games that have suffered bad scores due to launch titles, launch issues, bugs, missing elements, and questionable gameplay choices. But most of these issues can be fixed with some elbow grease. But once you have got a game that's boring in your hands, it cannot be fixed. And I assure you, I'd rather play a bad game any day than a boring one. Let's take a game like Gotham Knights. A game that is not bad in any stretch of the imagination, but it is a boring one. You could try to fix the combat or make it look prettier, but the foundational issues of the game cannot be fixed. So there is no amount of tweaks that can make it better. But look at a game like Cyberpunk, a game that sent fans into a frenzy when it was launched, has made such a strong comeback. The truth is, we always knew that there was a good game buried underneath all those bugs, and it was just a matter of time. And yeah, next time guys, release a game when it's actually ready. This comes down to just a very simple philosophy. There are mechanical problems and there are systematic, or I'll call them foundational problems. Please stay with me, it will eventually make sense, don't worry. Look at Dead Space 3. Might just go ahead and say it. EA is probably foaming in the mouth of the idea of remaking all 3 Dead Space games, and unlike Resident Evil or Final Fantasy VII, the work required to make them won't be as extensive. But there is Dead Space 3, a game that is universally seen as a bad Dead Space game, but it was never a boring one. Yes, it was basically Call of Duty with necromorphs, so what do? It all comes down to just going back to what makes Dead Space Dead Space. We tone down the ammo, we remove the co-op element, and we could even make John a secondary character. You can either select John or Isaac. Boom! Dead Space 3 can actually be remade. Now let's talk about Resident Evil. Starting with Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5 is a great game, just needs some few tweaks. The biggest issue Resident Evil 5 has always faced has been Shiva. We need to tweak Shiva. Let's make Shiva in line with current AI assisted characters like Ellie from Last of Us or Elizabeth from Infinite. I really liked Elizabeth. Remove her health bar. Nerf her a little, because I just watched a video of someone using Shiva to complete the entire game, and boom, Resident Evil 5 is ready for a remake. But Resident Evil 6 is a bit harder. Look, Resident Evil 6 is a bad game, there's no way around it, but it was never a boring one too. It resembles a goofy Hollywood B movie. A ton of fun, but definitely not winning any award. So let's run through some of the biggest issues with the game. 1. The excessive use of QuickTime events. It could have been the subtitle for the game. Look, Resident Evil 6, QuickTimes are plenty. It was also action focused. We all know that was the trend everybody was going through at that time. So we also have the fact that there were various protagonists with various chapter selections that lacked any cohesion. So let's try and fix it. I know your first suggestion is to completely gut out the QTEs and let's leave the WWE moves to the professionals. Make the gameplay feel more traditional to Resident Evil. But I don't really think so. As much as that sounds like the logical answer, doing that will make Resident Evil 6 lose its identity. The game should hold on to its QTEs in some form. The game already had a system that ensures you couldn't use them all the time. You could take it a step further and make QTEs only available after damage has been done with a firearm. Basically just make it a finisher. Remove all the naughty WWE moves and make it good old fashioned punches and kicks. Just it will kick in when you've done enough damage to a zombie and it will just be the remaining 20% to kill them. There is also a ton of action sequences that are borderline or wacky. It should be cleaned up and made a lot more grounded. There should also be a bit more cohesion between the different protagonist stories, because I really like the story of Resident Evil 6. I think it was the best part of that game. And with all this, I think Resident Evil 5 and 6 will be good to go. Yeah, there are a lot of deeper things like adding more tension, some puzzles revamp. Yes, all those things are also included, but I feel these things are the most important things, and if they can be fixed, I think Resident Evil 5 and 6 can be another very strong lineup in the remakes. I think the discussion about remakes and if they are necessary will always prop up anytime a new remake is on the horizon. I loved all 3 Resident Evil remakes. As long as the IP keeps getting new entries and they push the game forward, the 2 console gap, yeah, remakes are fine in my book. The truth is there are a lot of games with very good Metacritic scores that put me to bed within the first hour. And we can see they are not bad games, but they are boring ones. Every game should always strive to be fun. Fun should always be front and center in any gameplay loop, and that should be its first responsibility. It always baffles me when I see Ubisoft selling XP boosts in a single player game. So basically, you want me to pay you so I don't have to play your game? The games I tag as boring, fixing them would take gutting out the core fundamental aspects of the game, which might almost borderline on a brand new game. And this is not the case with Resident Evil 5 and 6. A lot of these game issues came down to greed, trying to chase the shooter craze. I think Resident Evil 5 and 6 can be remade because from the very onset, Resident Evil 5 and 6 were never boring games. They just had bad aspects to them. Thanks for taking our time to watch this video. If you want the Resident Evil 1 HD remake on Steam, just follow me on Twitter and reply the video post with either Chris or Jill. As usual, if you've gotten to the end of the video, you are a superstar and I appreciate every one of you. Yeah, there are some more videos you could also check out on the channel. Eyes out. Peace.